Good morning. Good morning. I got the signal from Brad, so I guess we are ready to start. My name is David Howell. My pronouns are he, him, and his. And our announcements today are mostly in your worship order here. There is a congregational meeting today at 12:30, so for all people on Zoom, there will be no regular Zoom meeting, but you can join the congregational meeting via Zoom. Excuse me while I put my glasses on. Our second Monday lunch, second Monday of every month, will be Monday on the 13th, 11:30 at Seasons Bar and Grill on Parkside Drive. If you're planning to attend, please contact Judy Bridgette. You have her email address there in your worship order, and can get it from that. Ongoing religious exploration offerings, thinking about theology, Wednesday at 6:30 on Zoom. Zoom link is in the newspaper, and Thursday evening conversations every week from 6:30 to 8. This is an ongoing adult RE series which meets for discussion on various topics. And Yoga by Bridgette. Here is Bridgette.
Hey everyone, so I'll be back next Sunday, and if you could let me know if you are going to take the class, because I've had several people say they couldn't come, so I need to know that I have people that are going to be there. But I'm back, and I'm going to be doing yoga again for everybody, and that's Sunday, May the 29th, and it'll be after church, and then June 12th and June 26th, and everyone's welcome, and I'm just excited to do it for you guys again, so thank you.
Thank you, Jen. More long-term things that are coming up, the Spirit Quest 2022 at Elkmod Group Camp. I did this 2 years ago, and it was a very good experience to go through. Sometimes we were by ourselves, sometimes we were together, did lots of things. It was, for me, a very enriching experience, and if you're going to be in town, then I recommend that you try it out. I think you might like it too. Then there are the other things that are long-term. So, good morning, good gathering, good to have you here. The choir is ready to sing at this point, and we will begin our worship.
Soul. Good morning, everyone. Good morning. Can you hear me okay? Do we need to turn this up a little bit? I think we need to go up on the microphone a little bit. Thank you. Perfect. It's good to see you all. Good to see you, all of you who are with us virtually. If you are new here and I have never met you, my name is Reverend Carol Bodeau. I am privileged to serve here as minister. My pronouns are she, her, and hers. Today we're going to be talking about something called engaged Buddhism or engaged action. So it's about engaged reflection, being present and calm and also active at the same time. So as I invite our bowl to sound this morning, what I'm going to invite you to do is notice two things at the same time. We have a tendency to focus on one thing at a time. And what I'm going to invite you to do is to notice that you are both still and also in motion at the same time. If you need to close your eyes to do this, try it out for a second. Notice that you're still, but maybe your thoughts are moving. Maybe you're feeling fidgety. Maybe you're sitting calmly, but your heart is pounding. Just notice what parts of you are still and what parts of you are moving at the same time as I invite our bowl to sound.
Reverend Carol will be lighting the chalice to begin that part of our service. She asked me to find a reading, and I found one without ever talking to her, and then noticed how well this fits what she just said. This is a story. A man traveling across a field encountered a tiger. He fled, the tiger after him. Coming to a precipice, he caught hold of the root of a wild vine and swung himself down over the edge. The tiger sniffed at him from above. Trembling, the man looked down to where far below another tiger was waiting to eat him. Only the vine sustained him. Two mice, one white and one black, little by little started to gnaw away the vine. The man saw a luscious strawberry near him. Grasping the vine with one hand, he plucked the strawberry with the other. How sweet it tasted.
So we're going to start with some words this morning that come from the Anapanasati Sutta. And this is one of the suttas on breathing, mindfulness on breathing, which is considered to be the Buddha's instructions on using the breath as a way to focus. Which, if you've got tigers above you and below you and mice chewing the very vines upon which you hang, you would need some mindfulness. On whatever occasion one trains oneself, I will breathe in and out, focusing, ardent, alert, and mindful, putting aside greed and distress with reference to the world. One sees with discernment the abandonment of greed and distress and watches carefully with equanimity. This is how mindfulness of in and out breathing is developed and pursued so as to bring mindfulness as a factor for awakening. Remaining mindful in this way, one examines, analyzes, and comes to comprehension. When one remains mindful in this way, examining, analyzing, and coming to comprehension, then analysis becomes aroused. And when these are maintained, next, persistence is aroused. In one whose persistence is aroused, a rapture not of the flesh arises, and when rapture not of the flesh arises, in one whose persistence is aroused, then rapture itself arises. For one enraptured at heart, the body grows calm and the mind grows calm. When the body and mind of one enraptured at heart grow calm, then serenity awakens. For one who is at ease with the body calmed, the mind becomes concentrated. One carefully watches the mind thus concentrated with equanimity, and thus one develops analysis as a factor for awakening, persistence as a factor for awakening, rapture as a factor for awakening, serenity as a factor for awakening, concentration as a factor for awakening, and equanimity as a factor for awakening.
It is time for our offering. Give as is comfortable for you. Our, our Share the Play partner for this quarter is the UU Association.
So throughout the course of the year here at Westside, we strive to be a congregation that is mindful and aware and present and awake to the things happening in our world. And there's certainly a lot happening in our world right now. One of the things we try to be awake to is the sorts of bias and prejudice that harm those in our community who may not have broad spread support in our society. So we honor a number of days of observance to remind us that the LGBTQ plus community needs our support. This week, May 17th each year, is actually a day of observance that is used to mark the prevalence in our world of bias and prejudice and phobia against LGBTQ plus people. So on May 17th each year since 2005, communities around the globe have marked an international day focused on countering fear, bias, and particularly legislation that targets and harms LGBTQ plus people. Currently, that day is called an International Day Against Homophobia, Transphobia, and Biphobia. It didn't start out being called that originally. It was called International Day Against Homophobia. And the date, May 17th, this is a very interesting fact. May 17th was chosen as the date because it commemorated May 17th, 1990, which was when the World Health Organization, this is shocking, it was 1990 when the World Health Organization finally declassified homosexuality as a mental disorder, which is shocking. In 2009, transphobia was added to the name of the campaign, and in 2015, biphobia was added. And the goal is to raise awareness of violence, discrimination, and repression against LGBTQ communities. It's designed to encourage dialogue with the media, policymakers, and the general public to help us create a safer and more just world. So where there's harm, we have to bring awareness. And where we bring our awareness, we have the possibility of bringing change. So we're going to light our community candle now in honor of that day and of those causes. Mindfulness is often triggered by paying attention to our breathing. So the choir is going to sing a meditation on breathing, and I'm going to invite you all to just listen, but pay attention to your breathing while we sing.
When I breathe in, I breathe in peace. When I breathe out, I breathe out love. When I breathe in, I breathe in peace. When I breathe out, I breathe out love. When I breathe in,
So breathing allows us to concentrate. Have you noticed that when you're anxious and fretting, your breathing picks up? And you'll always have people tell you if you're freaking out that you have to slow down the breath. Okay? So, oftentimes in our very busy world with a whole lot of stuff going on right now, we think we're too busy to stop and breathe. Now, maybe if you happen to be retired or have a more calm lifestyle, this is a little easier for you, but then turn on the news and notice what happens to your breathing. You might hold your breath, you might clench your jaw, you might tighten your chest. So today we're going to talk about the teachings of a masterful teacher who taught about how mindfulness and being aware helps us respond to the tiger above, the tiger below, and the mice chewing on the vine. Today we're going to be talking about an amazing spiritual teacher. He was a poet, an essayist, a public speaker, and an activist for peace. The Vietnamese Buddhist monk Thich Nhat Hanh, who is often referred to as Thay or Thai, which is teacher, died in January of this year. He was 85 years old when he died. And during his life, he actually created a whole new way of understanding Buddhism that was focused on engagement with the challenges of the world rather than withdrawing from it. So Thich Nhat Hanh was born in 1926 in Vietnam. He became a monk at the age of 16. By the time he was in his 20s, he was a scholar, he was a writer, he was editing publications, he was teaching. He traveled to the West to study, and then war came to Vietnam. And he was in Vietnam in the 60s, and he, with the other monks and nuns there, who'd been living a scholarly life, they were forced to decide how to respond. Should he remain quietly in the contemplative life and away from the chaos of the war, or should he step into the tumult of his time to participate in what was happening? He chose to do both. He chose to hold both things at the same time and became the founder of a movement known as Engaged Buddhism. It's a term that he actually coined in his book, Vietnam, Lotus in a Sea of Fire. Think about that image, lotus in a sea of fire. The very image describes the core of his teaching, a lotus. the ultimate symbol of peace and beauty and spiritual centering in many Eastern traditions. Afloat in a sea not of calm, cool water, but in a sea of fire. It's rather like the person hanging off the cliff, right, with the tiger above and below. So in 1966, Thich traveled to the West, where he had previously been a Fulbright scholar. He was a Fulbright scholar studying in Princeton previously. And in the 60s, he came back to the West to try to advocate for the end of hostilities in Vietnam. On that particular trip, he met the Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King Jr., and the following year, in 1967, Dr. King nominated Thich Nhat Hanh for a Nobel Peace Prize. He became a widely known activist, speaker, and teacher, talking about how to deal with war and strife and conflict. Because of his widespread notoriety for these persistent calls for peace and change, he was interestingly exiled by both North and South Vietnam, right? Everybody said, we don't want you around, because he was saying this has all got to stop. So all parts of Vietnam were like, we got to stop. So he was only able to return to visit his homeland many decades later. Decades later. He didn't go back until 2005 to visit Vietnam. During the intervening years, what he did was establish communities of engaged Buddhism around the world. He founded schools and monasteries. He continued to print. He actually had a printing press, an offset printing press in the bathroom of one of his places where he lived. The most notable village is Plum Village in France, and he lived most of his life there. He published books and essays and poems. He translated sacred texts, including a translation of I'm going to say it wrong unless I look at it, the Anapanasati Sutta, that sutta I read from. He actually has a translation of parts of that he published. He lectured. He was an influencer of other leaders. He spoke to both secular and religious leaders around the world. But he continued to be a contemplative monk. He was not flashy. He operated behind the scenes. He wasn't showy. So lots and lots of people have never heard of him. Matter of fact, before this service, when I mentioned to a couple of people I was going to be talking about Thich Nhat Hanh, they were like, I have no idea who that is. A couple of people said, I've heard the name, but I have no idea who he was. He was actually a huge influence in this world quietly. Mostly quietly. So, okay, he's a great person, that's really cool, but why is that relevant to us today? And I would say it's because of this, because the world is on fire. Think about that for a minute. The world is on fire in a lot of ways right now. Wars persist and migrate and grow around our world. Dictators in so many forms are grabbing and controlling and manipulating around the world. Our media and our popular culture are deeply troubled and twisted by misinformation and bias and fear. Our earth is suffering under the excesses of greed and misuse. And many of us feel hopeless, panicked, lost. We're not really sure what to do. Some days we feel a certain kind of doom. Other days we feel a certain kind of rage. We feel all sorts of things. We have all sorts of responses, but there's a little bit of a sense that there's a tiger above us, maybe a tiger below us, right? Now, to this situation, Thich Nhat Hanh would suggest, and did suggest, that we turn to mindfulness first and action second. The point of meditation, in his perspective, wasn't to run away or escape or avoid the world. It was to gather our focus and consolidate our energy and heighten and clarify our sense of purpose and direction in order to take more effective action. Meditation is not to escape from society, but to come back to ourselves and see what is going on. Once there is seeing, there must be acting. With mindfulness, we know what to do and what not to do to help. All right, but there's no time for people who are still working and busy. There's no time. Maybe you're retired and you're too busy. There's no time to meditate. And besides that, meditation doesn't do any good. How in the world can me sitting still and saying Om or some such thing actually make any difference in the fire? I've got to put out the fire. Here's the thing. When we act out of panic, when we react from this feeling of fighting or fleeing or freezing, or some of you may have heard the newly added fourth F, fawning, fight, flight, freeze, fawn. Think about those. Fight, flight, freeze, or fawn. We have just added excessive people-pleasing to the list of panic responses. Okay? When we do those things, we actually make it worse. We just add the fuel of anger or hatred or panic and despair to the flames already burning around us. That's not helpful. The point Tay was making is to cool our own inner fire before trying to deal with the fire in the world. Just ask yourself honestly, in the last 6 months, have you been triggered to a sense of panic or despair or hopelessness or a feeling like, what's the point, resignation, urgency? Pick any of them. Rage, judgment, terror. Pick a reaction. I'm pretty sure everybody in the room can think that, yeah, I've had one of those at least once. How many of us, in response to that, have the urge to do something, to fix it quick? How many of us have a fire of urgency and rage or vengeance burning in our own hearts right now? Those feelings and impulses acted out without some deep and measured awareness, what you're doing is we're adding a climate of destruction and negativity that actually makes it worse. So, how can we change that? How much better am I than my perceived enemy if what I send out into the world to combat them is fear, judgment, hatred, rage, the desire to just annihilate them and make them go away? This is like an adult who hits a child while yelling, "Don't hit, hitting is bad." I have actually witnessed parents doing that, right? It's like the teacher who teaches by telling a student how stupid they are. Telling someone, "You're such an idiot, you shouldn't be so intolerant," is sort of hypocritical. So when we react out of these emotions, we're actually just adding fuel to the fire burning. So, mindful, engaged Buddhism, or mindful reflective action is an alternative. Mindful action it's more effective, plain and simple. It's more effective than mindless action. And by mindful, this is important, we mean something different than action based on fretting and fuming and ruminating. That is not mindfulness. Staying awake for 4 hours at night, ruminating and fretting on the troubles of the world is not mindfulness. It's different than that. Mindfulness is deep awareness and calm presence. Mindful action is action that is the result of the things outlined in the sutta. First, we focus on the breath or something else that allows us to become deeply aware of ourselves thinking. So the goal is to be a good observer, to be a good receiver of data. Okay? So maybe it's the breath, maybe it's focusing on a piece of music, maybe it's focusing on something beautiful in front of you, but focusing and calming. Second, we develop analysis, observation, and understanding of what's right in front of us. Tay uses words like this to describe this part of it: investigation, examination, and scrutiny. But it's observing. When you're fretting, you're thinking all kinds of other things and calmly thinking, what am I observing? You're thinking, this is bad, this is not bad, this is good, I've got to, right? It's mostly judgments going through our minds. This is truly calmly observing. Next comes persistence, which is an antidote to urgency and avoidance. Think about that for a minute. Urgency, got to act right now. Avoidance, can't deal with this. Persistence is a steady middle place. Tay describes it as an energy or an inner resource that we use to continue. This gives rise to what the sutta names as rapture, or a sort of joy that comes maybe just from being able to see clearly, calmly, what's in front of us. And then this gives rise to a sense of peace or serenity that comes with clarity when confusion and chaos on the inside calm down. Thus, we become truly able to concentrate, to develop a level-headed, calm, neutral place inside where we can respond without being reactive. And that's where effective action comes from. How many of you have ever sent the email you wish you hadn't sent? That's a reactive action. That was not a responsive action, that was a reactive action. How many of you have said the word to your partner or your friend and then thought, ooh, wish I could take that back? That was a reactive speaking rather than responsive. And this applies at all levels. If the world is on fire, as we could argue today that maybe there's some fire out there going on, then we know that avoidance isn't necessarily a good strategy, right? Just plain avoiding it, it's not a good strategy. It's not going to get better. But reactivity is an equally poor response. Mindful engagement requires us to do something different. First, it requires self-awareness. It demands that we acknowledge our own tendencies to react. And specifically, it makes us pay attention to the ways we react in ways that are disturbingly similar to those we fear or judge or are mad at. Second, it requires persistence and steadiness. It insists that we avoid and resist that reactive response and instead cultivate clarity so that we can act for the long haul, right? Finally, it requires equanimity. This is a word that, you hear in Eastern and meditation teaching a lot, equanimity. What does that mean? Equanimity is a sense that we are going to hold ourselves steady in a place of calm and cool so that we can approach the fire from a place of presence. Think about first responders. First responders have to have a sense of equanimity when they go into a traumatic experience. They have to come in with a sense of like, I'm taking action, but I am not freaking out. I'm not panicking. I'm not hysterical. I'm not mad at the person who did the thing that caused the accident. I will think about that later, but right now I am responding from a place of calm purpose. So, all of these things are ways to describe basically saying, be the change you wish to see in the world. If you want the world to be more peaceful, you want there to be less judgment, you got to go into it with that frame of mind and body. Gathering our breath, gathering our energy, gathering our thoughts, gathering our attention, and our intention. I'm going to repeat that. Gathering not just our attention, but our intention. We are able to act in ways that are more effective and more efficient. And that seems kind of important right now. That's kind of a priority right now. So I would encourage us all to take a minute and try this little experiment. Let's try a little mental experiment with ourselves. Think of something that is upsetting you. It feels like a fire in your life, in your world. Think of something that is on fire. It can be very personal or very global. Now, while you're holding the thought of that thing, notice your breathing. Breathe in thinking about the fire. Breathe out, noticing the fire. Breathe in, remembering things are on fire. Breathe out, still on fire. Notice your thoughts as you do this. Notice your feelings. What words come rushing up to your mind? What feelings come rushing up in your body? Remember the fire again. Just put your attention back on the fire. And breathe again. If resistance to doing this very exercise comes up, and you're thinking, oh, for goodness sake, here we are. She's making us doing some weird thing again. Notice your resistance to breathing and paying attention. Just notice it. Because resistance to mindfulness is a fire. Resistance to slowing down and being mindful is a fire. So persist. And notice if maybe some calm doesn't arise somewhere that wasn't there before. There's a reason that the teachings of meditation practices in various traditions have persisted around the world for centuries and centuries. And it's not because it's some, separate from this world avoidance technique. It's because we simply are more powerful when we do this. We simply are more able to be active in a way that's effective when we're actually present. So I'm going to encourage you to try this out a couple times this week. I'm going to plant the seed in your thoughts right now. At some moment during the next week when the fire lights up, you've just turned on the news and you've just heard the latest thing on the news. Or you've just gotten a call from that family member who every time they call, the fire lights up. Or you've just looked at, your bank account or the scale or your partner or whatever it is, and the fire lights up. And you feel that sense of upset and gotta do something. In that moment, contemplate just taking a few deep breaths. Because right now, the fires that are burning in our world are not quick fixes. We're going to need persistence. We're going to need a sense of inner peace and the ability to stay calm. We're going to need staying power. We're going to need actions for the long haul. This isn't going to be quick fix it, just like the tigers and the mice. It's okay to stop and eat a strawberry and then put our attention back on what's happening. So, I invite you to take a couple deep breaths now. Breathing in, we breathe in air that we share. The breath is just a symbol of our collective experience. We are all breathing. If nothing else, COVID has taught us that the air we breathe is connected to the air other people breathe. Right? We are breathing together on this planet. So we breathe in this shared air, a collective experience. And when we breathe out, we release into the world what's inside us. Whatever we're sending out is going into the collective air. Let us breathe out peace, strength, clarity, purpose, intention, calm. May we go out into the world with a sense of peace and passion and purpose. What we breathe out, we actually move our bodies that way. When we breathe out with a calm breath, we move our bodies and our words and our actions in a different way. I'm not going to extinguish the chalice today, because we are going to be going into our congregational meeting, which is about focusing the future of this community. How do we want to go forward in the world? Who do we want to be? Who do we want to be next week and next month and next year? And that applies to everyone in this room and everyone who's watching this service right now, or next Thursday, or 5 years from now, because that's the world we live in. Who do we want to move into the world being? Let us do that mindfully. May it be so. I'm going to play a little music as we finish this time and just let you all sit and breathe as long as you want. Get up and move around, get a drink, whatever you need to do.